Hello quilting friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Corey Yoder of Coriander Quilts, and today I am bringing you a video that is almost a year in the making. Not because it actually took a year to get this video made, but because it took about a year for me to get my behind in gear and get this quilt tutorial slash pattern made for you guys. If you remember, last year I looked up the date. It was February 25th. I released a video called something to the effect of Moda Mystery Box. And in that video, I unboxed a whole bunch of goodies from Moda Fabrics, and I talked about the notions in the box and shared about the fabrics in the box. And then throughout that video, I used some of the different notions and then used the fabrics to make a quilt. And I promised that I would share the quilt pattern with you, stating that it was a very simple to make pattern and I couldn't wait to share that with you. And those things haven't changed. It's a very simple pattern and I've been excited to share the pattern with you. It just hasn't gotten done until just now. So without further ado, you've seen this quilt. You've seen it recently if you've been watching, because I just finished the quilts, got the quilt tops finished. Got the quilts finished. The quilt tops have actually been done for quite a while. So I shared these with you recently, and this one you've seen if you've been watching my videos, and this next one you've seen. And over the last 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I've made 2 more quilt tops that need to be quilted in preparation for this video. And so I am so excited to finally share the pattern for this quilt. I'm calling it my Calliope quilt pattern. So I have the pattern for you that you can download over on my blog, and I am going to be walking you through the tutorial for the block here today and showing you these 2 quilt tops. It's such a fun pattern and I've really enjoyed it, and I think you are going to enjoy it too. If you missed that Moda Mystery Box unboxing, I have that video linked in the description box below, so you can go catch that, get caught up with the original making of these quilt tops. Let me show you the 2 new ones that you haven't seen. These quilt tops are so fast to make. They finish at about 45 by 60, so a really nice throw size. And once you see how you make these blocks, I think you'll be surprised because they are so simple to make. So this is the first of the new quilt tops. This uses Moda Bella Solids, and then that polka dot fabric is from my Coriander Colors line of fabric that comes out in June. So that's what this one looks like. This kind of tickled me because it just looks to me like a Saved by the Bell quilt. I don't know if any of you guys are Saved by the Bell generation of people, but I know I was, and it made me laugh. This quilt just gives me Saved by the Bell vibes, which is kind of funny. So sort of an 80s spin on this one. And then I wanted to make another one and wasn't set on what fabrics I wanted to use. And so I asked my daughter Chloe, and she said, let's do a pink one. And so I chose a bunch of pink fabrics from my various lines of fabric, and we did a pink version of this quilt top also. So this is what Calliope looks like. And now I'm going to share that pattern with you. Now you can download this pattern over on my blog. I've got that linked down below as well. It's a free pattern over there. Long overdue in the making, but I promised I would get it made for you. And so here we have it. Okay, let's take a look at this pattern here. Lay some of these things out, and then I'm going to walk you through a block. And I'm so excited to share this with you. All right, so you are going to need for your fabrics 12 dark fat quarters and then 4 light fat quarters. Now you can switch those. In the first quilts that I showed you, there was one that had predominantly white with those red frames. That quilt, I switched those. So I did 12 lights and 4 darks. So you can switch those if you want to, but you need them to have contrast. So 12 dark, 4 light, a ½ yard of fabric for binding, and then your backing and your batting fabric. You do not need any background fabric, which is fun. So your fat quarters, and you can get started cutting. From your 12 dark fat quarters, you're cutting 4 3 3/4 inch by 18-inch rectangles from each of those fat quarters, so a total of 48. And then from the light fat quarters, you're doing 6 2-inch by 18-inch rectangles for a total of 24. And I have cut just a little bit of a grouping here so I can show you how to piece those. So these are my darks, and these fabrics are Starberry fabrics, which is my Christmas line of fabric that will be coming out here in May, so pretty soon. And then my lights. Again, this one here is, oh, he was tucked off the bottom of the screen so you couldn't see that. Let me organize this a little bit here. Move that over. There we go. That's looking better. All right, so this is Starberry. These are Starberry. This polka dot is from Coriander Colors. The first thing that you're going to want to do is sew together your strip sets. So 2 A's, which are the larger rectangles, and then 1 B. So you'll just pair them together in a pleasing manner. I'm going to do those 3 together, and then I'm going to do these 3 together. You're going to sew all of your rectangles together in this manner, just like it shows here. And when you are pressing, you are going to want to press 12 of these units towards the center, and you're going to press 12 of the units away from the center. So I will sew these 2 pairs together. I'm going to press 1 towards the center, 1 away from the center, and then I'm going to meet you back here. This is what the strip sets will look like after you've sewn them together. I have pressed 1 set away from the center, 1 set towards the center. And so now the next thing we need to do is actually a following page. We are trimming these units into 8 1/2 inch squares. Right now, they're going to measure roughly 8 1/2 by 18, which gives us a little bit of room to trim off the front side here, the left side, as well as the right side. So I'm going to trim these into 8 1/2 inch squares. Get rid of that little guy. 8 1/2 here. And then right here. So we will have squares that look like this, 8 1/2 inch squares. Let's go ahead and do that other set. And when you're making the full quilt, you're going to have 24 of these sets to trim up total. So of those 24, you'll have 12 pressed towards the center and 12 pressed away from the center. So you can see how quickly this project is going already. These blocks don't really take that long to make. Okay, there we go. So now we've got our cute little 8 1/2 inch squares. The next step is going to be to draw diagonal lines across the back of the blocks that are pressed towards the center. So that's away from the center. We don't want those. These are towards the center. And what you're going to want to do is mark your lines from the top left to the bottom right when this strip is placed vertically. It is important that you do these all the same. So the blocks press towards the center, and we're going top left to bottom right when we are marking. You can either draw one diagonal line down the center as the pattern shows, and then you will be sewing a 1/4 inch on either side of that drawn diagonal, or you can mark your sewing lines, which is what I am going to do. I've started drawing my sewing lines a lot more frequently than I used to, and oh, that one doesn't work. That's actually not what I want. I want my other little tool, which I don't have down here. Let me go grab it. And then I don't know how you're going to splice that together. This is the one I meant to grab. This is a little 1/4 inch ruler, and it fits perfectly on these blocks, and it's what I use to mark the other tops that I made. So these are the sewing lines that I'm marking, like so. And then I'll do this one as well. while I am here. And then we will be ready to sew again. That one. There we go. So those are the sewing lines. Whether you mark the sewing lines or you mark the diagonal and then know you need to sew a 1/4 inch on either side of that line, either method works great. Now, we're going to be putting these together and constructing these just like you would with half square triangles. So I'm going to grab one of my other squares, put that down, and we're going to do right sides together. This should be also going vertically, so both of your narrow center strips run vertically. And you're going to put those on top of each other. You do want those seams to nest together, so you can budge them around so that they nest. And then you can pin here if you want to, pin on either side of your seams here if you need to so that they don't budge. I found that they just sort of stayed put where they needed to, and I'm not a pinner anyway, so I did not need to pin, but you could pin to hold these in place. And then you're just going to sew as you would if you were making a half square triangle. So I will pair these both together. If I had a whole bunch of these made, like I would if I was making the whole quilt, I would want to pair together different pairs of fabric so that they would be different. But I'll go ahead and sew these both together and meet you back here. After you have sewn your block together, this is what it's going to look like. Very much like a half square triangle. And you can see how it's starting to take shape already. The next step is to cut this apart on that diagonal. I just have this small little ruler down here. If I had a longer ruler, that would be my preference, but this one will work. We're just going to cut that apart there, and we are left with 2 units. Now, this final seam, you are going to want to press open. One of the tools I talked about in that Moda Mystery box was this You and Me pressing bar, and I have very much enjoyed continuing to use this over the last year. That's always one of the things that's interesting when I try out new notions. I never know, is this something that seems really great for right now, but you know, maybe a year from now, I'm not going to be using it any longer. This is a tool that I have used throughout the whole year. In fact, anytime I have to press a seam open, this is what I reach for. It has wool on the bar, and I don't know if it's the curve of it or what it is exactly that makes it so nice. I've tried other pressing bars and I enjoy using them too, but this one to me is a little bit simpler to use, and it gives me such a nice seam. So if you want to see me demoing this, I did demo it in that Moda Mystery video. So the link that I've mentioned a few times, you can check that out. So after you have cut those apart, you will press that final seam open and you will be left with blocks like this. And you can see how that looks on the back with that seam pressed open. We have one more step to take to finish these blocks, and then they are done. They really do come together quickly. We just need to trim them. We are trimming them to 8 inches square. And on the pattern here, I show you kind of the dimensions that you are aiming for when you are trimming these. Now, some of your blocks are going to be pretty much spot on. Some of them are going to be close, but maybe not exact. So just trim them as close as you can to these measurements. And the closer that you are for the majority of them, the better everything is going to match together when it comes time to sew the blocks together. We are trimming these to 8 inches by 8 inches square, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when I follow this trimming diagram. This is an 8.5 inch square ruler, so I have my 1/2 inch running on the perimeter edges here, and I want this little first section to measure 3 inches, this section here to measure 1.5 on both sides, and then this section right here I want measuring 3 1/2 on those sides. So this actually falls in there pretty nicely. I'm going to trim this here. Get rid of those little sprouts. Pivot this around here, and then I'm going to leave that 1/2 inch on my outside edge. I can make sure that my diagonal is running right down the center there. And get everything lined back up again. It's harder for me to do when the lights are reflecting off of my ruler there, but I think I've got it. You guys got a nice view of the top of my head as I was looking. And then there we go. And so that's what that block is going to look like trimmed up. Now, if you had a rotating mat, you might find it easier to pivot your block around a little bit while you are trimming, but trim those 4 sides and you are looking at an 8-inch block right there. And then you would just repeat that for your other block. Make sure your diagonal is running nice and tidy down through there. Following these measurements here along your edge, you can make sure everything matches up nicely. This one looks pretty good as well. Get those other sides trimmed, and that is all it takes for these blocks. They are going to be complete once I have this trimmed. Okay, looks pretty good there. And then the last step is just to lay your blocks out and sew them all together. It's such a fun quilt top to make. But this is how these are going to lay together. Your seams are going to nest nicely there because we have pressed them the way we did. I'm going to go to this next page here. You can see how you lay everything out. You're going to end up with 48 blocks, and you're going to lay them out in rows 6 across by 8 down, and pressing left, right, and then once you have all of your rows sewn together, you can press in one direction. And that's it. And that's how easy these blocks are. They look like they should be trickier than that. They look like maybe we are dealing with some funny angles, but we're really not. And they do come together so nicely. So I'm going to show you these quilt tops one last time here, and you can swing over to my blog to grab that quilt pattern. So this is what it looks like when we're doing darks for the 12 fat quarters and lights for the 4 fat quarters. And then when we do the reverse, well, actually not when we do the reverse. This other quilt top, I chose just 1 fabric for those 4 fat quarters. So if you do that, you end up with something like this, which you can do. You can do those 4 fat quarters all in 1 fabric. Now let me show you that reverse. I've got everything all scattered around my set here, and that's not even the one I wanted. I'm gonna have hubby hand me that other one that I want. But this one I'll show you. So this is darks for the 12, lights for the 4, and then throwing it on in. There we go. This is the opposite with lights for the 12 and then darks for the 4. So you see, you can really play around with this quite a bit. Making these starberry blocks has me wanting to make a whole Christmas version. These quilts do go together pretty quickly. I made, as I said, those 2 quilt tops in the last couple weeks, and over the course of probably 2 to 3 days each, and just a few hours spent each day. So they really don't take long. The cutting goes fast. There's trimming that we have to do, but it really doesn't take that long, and it makes such a nice throw size quilt. It's an easy quilt pattern to make more of. Just add additional fat quarters, add additional blocks, and of course you could also add borders if you wanted to. So there it is, guys. We've been waiting a little while, but now we finally have that fun pattern. I think it's one that I'm going to revisit quite often because it makes a really nice size, quick to put together, doesn't take a lot of fabric, and it makes it look like you worked harder on it than you actually did. And I think that's a fun quilt pattern when someone looks at it and says, oh wow, that looks so hard, but it's really simpler than it looks. I think that's a really neat quilt pattern to make. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you take advantage of that free pattern. If you have any questions, please be sure to let me know, and I thank you so much for stopping by.